And we're back. And WandaVision is over, so, like, what now? You could slip into a Wanda-less depression, or you could read comics. I have compiled for you a relatively beginner-friendly guide to Wanda Maximoff comics so you can learn more about your favorite witch. And of course, I have to briefly recap and talk to you about the WandaVision finale. So without further ado, let's talk television and comics. So this finale really came out the gate and was like, did you forget that you were watching a Marvel show? Because just in case you did, here's 3 superhero landings, 2 superhero dudes just destroying an entire town, 2 witches yelling at each other, and some children being shot at. It was a lot. Here I was 2 episodes ago, begging for a fight, so excited to see some drama, and then as it was happening, I was like, oh my god, this is so much. This is so much. I forgot. I'm overwhelmed. A lot of things are happening. Lots of people are yelling. I don't know. It was fine. There were lots of things that I did like about this episode. I think Wanda's transformation was super cool into the Scarlet Witch. I liked to see sort of the transformation of her naivety toward witchcraft, and her understanding that she needs to study in order to understand herself and her power. I think that was a good sort of growing arc for her character, and, you know, you love to see it. But also, she grieved so hard and she was so upset that she created an entire false reality where she was a mom and she was married to her toaster husband, and she's just done. She's just done being sad and, like, emotionally a little unstable. Just like that. Alright. Whatever. I don't know. To me, it seemed, I guess, like a little rushed. And it wasn't even because it didn't meet my expectations, right? It was so much fun to speculate wildly about what was going on in the show in the earlier episodes on this channel, where we recapped every episode and we talked about things we knew, things we thought we knew, and things we definitely didn't know. And the reason why this video isn't going that way is because it's over. All I have left is questions. So, you know, I just, I don't know. There were lots of really fun things about this episode. I loved seeing Tommy and Billy get to flex their powers. I loved seeing Monica with them. I thought that was so fun. You know, and the fight between Wanda and Agatha was fine. She was kind of like, I don't know. I don't really think she was like an actual bad guy, right? She just served the purpose to help Wanda sort of find herself, which is fine, but it wasn't exactly the conflict I was looking for, which is whatever. You know, I love that Wanda was able to pull herself back, and she sacrificed so much to make sure that other people were safe. Like, she understood what she was doing was wrong, and ultimately I think that was the right move, because Wanda Maximoff, like I've said before, is a really good character. She's a good person. So, you know, I just chalk it up to naivety, which is strange to me. Strange. Doctor Strange, get it? Speaking of Doctor Strange, he never showed up. So, there's that. Also, it kind of seemed weird to me that the FBI and also Monica were just like, you committed some major crimes, but pop off. Goodbye. Enjoy your reading. But ultimately, this sets up a really good arc for Wanda for the future. And of course, we have those 2 after-credits scenes, and that just opens a door of many, many questions. And so I have them for you, and we're going to speculate a little together, because that's what we do, right? Me and you, we speculate? Okay. But they're not just my questions. I pulled my coworkers. I roped them into my nonsense once again. Haha. Anyway, here are some questions that I have. First of all, where did White Vision go? We have to talk about that scene with the 2 visions in the a lot of this episode felt very heavy-handed to me. Like, having the 2 visions fight in that library was like, I get it. Like, Vision's all about knowledge and like, hearing the 2 of them talk and argue felt like sitting between 2 college-age philosophy majors and just like listening to them talk about something mundane, but make it just really painful for you. You know what I mean? And I understand why it had to happen. It was really important to Vision's arc, and it also leaves it open for what's going on with White Vision. And that was TV Vision's, you know, Wanda's vision. It was his last gift to her. And that is sweet, of course. And it speaks to their love, and I thought that was very special. But it was a lot for me. So where did he go? You know, he flies to the ceiling of the libraries. He's just gonna like go sit in a park and mope and contemplate his existence, right? Because as they talk about the 2 visions, you know, is he real Vision because he's Vision's parts? but not memories, but now he has the memories, and does that make him who he is? And of course it's challenging his new sort of AI that was given to him through Sword, and, you know, there's a lot of things for poor white Vision, who was born theoretically just a couple days ago, to deal with. So where'd he go? We have to see him in the future again, right? Like, they're not just gonna be like, okay, he's just gone into the ether forever. It's so wild. Alright. We have to talk about Ralph Bohner. I hate the MCU for making me say that. Do you think that he was the person in the witness protection program? And, like, here's where I'm gonna speculate a little wildly. Like, is he Pietro from a different reality and he's in the witness protection program as Ralph Bohner? Because isn't that just the name that Fox Pietro would call himself? Ralph Bohner. He even laughs about it, you know what I mean? It just seemed so weird and rushed that Monica just happened to be going through, like, the 3 documents that were on the table as her and Pietro were together, and she finds his mugshot, and then suddenly she realizes that she can break him from Agatha's hold. I don't know. To me, it just doesn't seem quite right. But maybe that was their way of quickly closing it up. You know what I mean? It was just like a nod to the Fox franchise to get people like me just speculating wildly and just spiraling. And it worked. So, kudos, I guess. This is a little bit of a sad one. Did Billy know? I think Billy knew, right? In that scene in the bedroom when Wanda's like, thank you for choosing me to be your mom, Billy kind of gives her like this knowing smile because Billy can read minds. And so the hex is closing in, and I think he knows that he and Tommy are about to cease to exist. And all the sadness that his mom's gonna feel. That's a lot for a 10-year-old. It made me kind of sad for him. Is romance blossoming between one Monica Rambeau and our favorite Jimmy Woo? Here's why I ask that. Oh no, my lights went out. We're just gonna continue like nothing happened. Here's my evidence for why I maybe think this. This photo right here of Monica in the end credit scene where she's just looking at Jimmy Woo, like, I don't know. If I look at somebody like that, I'm like, what's up? You know what I mean? She doesn't need a romance. You know what I mean? Like, I don't love the idea of female characters only existing to be in relationships, but I would stan it if it happened. You know what I mean? I love them both. I think they're both great characters. I think even though they didn't have like a ton of screen time, their character development was pretty great. And I mean, who just doesn't adore Jimmy Woo? Monica is so cool and so kick butt. I know she can stand on her own. But food for thought. So the first end credit scene has somebody come up to Monica and sort of usher her into the empty theater saying, you know, they want you in there. And it turns out that person is a Skrull, right? And we remember Skrulls from Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel protected them against the Kree, and also they made friends with Monica Rambeau's mom, Maria Rambeau, who of course started Sword. It's like a whole thing. What do the Skrulls want? It seems like Monica's going to be going to space, which is pretty interesting. When are we going to see that happen, though? When are we going to be able to circle back to what Monica is doing? The Eternals? Like, do the Eternals have anything to do with the Skrulls? I don't know, to be honest. But I'm interested. Is she going to show up in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier? I don't think so. It doesn't seem... That show seems like 2 dudes punching Nazis. I'm here for it, but I don't think that's the place for, like, space travel and aliens and stuff. But maybe it is. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm just curious as to when that's going to happen. It doesn't seem like there is a logical space for that. So did Wanda flee to Wundagore Mountain? The very last end credit scene, we see Wanda, and it just so happens to be a mountainous area where she's in this secluded house. And it's an important scene because we see her flexing this power, right? This very strong power where her corporeal form is outside drinking tea or holding a teacup because she's making tea. And then her spiritual self, her astral projection self, is studying the Darkhold, right? Her Scarlet Witch self. And this is important because Agatha brings up the fact that she's stronger than the Sorcerer Supreme, which is Doctor Strange. It seems weird to me that they would just bring that up. So they're definitely hammering that point home because when Doctor Strange astral projects, his body is out cold, right? And that, of course, is a vulnerability. Wanda is just walking around. Living her best life. Good for her. I wish I could, like, simultaneously walk around and drink tea and also, like, I don't know, write my articles and shoot my videos and stuff. Where do I get that power? Anyway, back to Wundagore Mountain. Wundagore Mountain is important because at the end of House of M, which is the sort of the arc that this is loosely based off of, She flees to Wonder Mountain after the events of House of M, and all reality is restored to the way it's supposed to be, and mutants are depowered. And she ends up becoming the amnesic fiance of Doctor Doom. I don't necessarily know that they're going to introduce Doctor Doom. However, we do hear at the very end, we hear Billy and Tommy crying out for her. Mom, help us. And it sounds just like the kids sounded when Agatha had a hold of them. And I think that's interesting because this kind of sets up the next thing. Are her and Doctor Strange gonna fight? I had never thought of this before, and I felt like it was some big brain theory, and let me kind of explain here. So she hears the kids, right? We know Wanda by now. Any mom would tear the universe apart. My mom would find a way to get the Scarlet Witch powers and tear the world apart if she thought I was hurt somewhere in a weird other reality. Like maybe I had been reborn into actual children, like happens in the comics with Billy and Tommy. But Doctor Strange's entire existence is to keep magical balance, right? That's what he does. And so if Wanda is going around and ripping apart realities looking for her kids, they're going to be at odds, which I think is potentially really interesting. I had only thought of them teaming up for some reason. So I'm interested in that. And also, I think it's interesting that the boys, that sounded just like when Agatha had a hold of them, because it makes me feel like almost like somebody is mimicking something that actually happened in order to try and lure Wanda in. And this whole sort of episode was about Wanda's naivety, right? And she's bettering herself. She's taking that knowledge and she's teaching herself. But that doesn't mean that she's not kind of impulsive, still kind of naive, and that she doesn't follow with her emotions and her heart. And so here's some questions that my lovely friends and coworkers, Christina and Nate, asked me. Christina said, if this was the first MCU thing I've ever watched, where do I go next? Well, buckle up. I would say Age of Ultron if you're only interested in Wanda Maximoff, of course, and you also get the correct Pietro if we're talking about TV versions or movie versions of Pietro. You know what happens to him, so spoiler alert. But I mean, I would just start watching. There are tons of different ways that you can watch all of the, Marvel movies, and I know it's quite a long thing, but Age of Ultron is definitely where you want to go. And then Captain America Civil War. If you're interested in what's going on with Wanda, that's your best bet. She also asked if there would be a WandaVision season 2. Kevin Feige, who's like the Marvel gods or whatever, he just kind of like threw out there that there may be a chance that some of these shows are getting a season 2, and of course it was like super vague. It's just to like placate us. Who knows? She also asks, what's going on with Agnes? And that's a good question. I think that she's just living as a resident of Westview, New Jersey, like the actual town, as they're like putting it all back together, because that's what Wanda willed, and Wanda's strong enough to make that happen, as we saw tenfold. But, and of course, leaves the opportunity for her to come back. And it seems silly for Marvel to leave that opportunity and not take it up, do something with it at some point. How? Not a clue. Sorry. And last but not least, my dear friend Nate. He says, how do I find a Wanda of my own? And you know what, buddy? Same. I don't know. Tinder's not working out for me. Let me know what works out for you, because maybe I'll try it too. But I do know a way that you can get more of your new favorite witch in your life, and that, of course, is through comics. Now, I know not everybody who enjoys the MCU content reads comics, and comics isn't always the easiest thing to break into. They've been going on for a long time, and the Scarlet Witch has been a character since the 60s and 70s. So there's a lot of her, and she's in a lot of weird crossover things. Her backstory has been retconned, as we talked about in the previous video, which means retroactive continuity, which means it's just been rewritten for fun a few times. So where do you start? What do you do? I have a list for you. This is my beginner-friendly list to important Wanda Maximoff comics, so you can get an understanding of who this witch really is. Look, I'm not gonna make you start in the 60s, but you can if you want with their first appearance. My warning to non-comics readers is I'm gonna start you off in the 80s, but the costumes are still very silly. That's not to say that the art isn't great, that the storytelling isn't great, because it is. But this is Hawkeye's outfit. He looks like a rejected mascot from Chuck E. Cheese. So just know what you're getting into, you know what I mean? If you can look past that, then I think that the 80s are a good place to start. I'm gonna look at my notes, so don't judge me. So I want you to start with the Vision and Scarlet Witch. That's the title. They were miniseries in 1982 and 1985, and basically it's a look at like Wanda and Vision's married life. But also you get a lot of really important context about who they are, including the birth of their sons, Billy and Tommy, and also Pietro's in there, and his daughter Luna is born, which is pretty pretty cool. You also learn that Magneto is their father. So this is not true to the MCU canon as far as we know. However, this is the widely accepted backstory of the twins in the comics, and you learn that both of their parents are Holocaust survivors, that their mother was named Magda, and she was a Romani woman, and their father is Eric Lenzer, and he is Jewish. So they're Romani and Jewish. So it's just some really interesting sort of backstory about their ethnic background and all that stuff. Of course, none of that stuff holds true in the MCU. Largely problematic. We know that. Okay. And then if you want, you don't have to, but if you're interested in White Vision, you can go to West Coast Avengers 42 is where it starts, and I think it's like 5 or 7 issues or something. Basically, Vision gets destroyed, he's then rebuilt, he doesn't have any feelings, he remembers the boys and Wanda, but he doesn't have any love for them. Wanda and Vision get a divorce. It's like some domestic stuff. It's fine. But from there, we're gonna go to modern comics. There's a ton of stuff in between if you're interested. I mean, Wanda has been in so many things, so many crossovers, written by so many different people. There's a ton for you to read if you want, but I think that this is required Wanda Maximoff reading, right? We're gonna go to Avengers Disassembled. Now, here's a little backstory for this. Basically, Agatha Harkness made Wanda forget her boys, and when she remembered, and they weren't there, she had a huge mental breakdown and accidentally killed some Avengers. Whoops. And that leads right into House of M. Now, I'm sure you've heard a lot of talk about House of M from me, and also, I don't know if you've Googled at all about WandaVision. And basically, in House of M, Wanda is still in a state, right? She's grieving even harder because she has killed some of her friends in Avengers. And she creates this false reality with her reality warping powers and sort of sucks everybody into it, right? And she brings those dead Avengers back to life, she brings her kids back, everything is fine. Well, until people find out that it's not a real reality, and then they just start talking about whether or not they're gonna kill her because she's too powerful. I'm gonna give you a little bit of a trigger warning here. Because I care about you guys, and I know that the topic of mental health is very, very serious. And I think a valid criticism of this story could be that this is sort of a modern retelling of female hysteria, which isn't great. I enjoyed these comics, but I also understand that they're problematic in some ways. You know what I mean? Basically, they took this very powerful character and just did really terrible things to her until her fragile mind broke. You know, like, You know, so if you're not into that, maybe don't read them. However, I suggest that you do. If you liked WandaVision, you know, you would like House of M, I think. So at the end of House of M, this really important thing happens where Wanda depowers like 90% of the world's mutants. Super wild. And she runs away to Wundagore Mountain, where then, as I mentioned before, she becomes the amnesic fiance of Dr. Doom. Then, this isn't really required, but you might be interested in it. It's more about Speed and Wiccan, Billy and Tommy. You should read Young Avengers Present Wiccan and Speed. And this is more about how the boys were reincarnated and blah blah blah, but it leads into the next required piece of reading, which would be Avengers Children's Crusade, where Billy and Tommy get together and they're looking for their mother, and they join the Young Avengers, and also they tag along Quicksilver and Magneto, and they all go to find Wanda. It's a rescue mission. I don't want to spoil it for you because it's really good. And also there's some just top tier Quicksilver and Speed, like witty banter. I think they're hysterical. It's a great comic. I really, really enjoyed it. And that's kind of the last before we get to the retcon, which is what is allegedly the MCU canon, right? So the canon is that Magneto is not Wanda's father in WandaVision and in the MCU. And if you're interested in that, you're going to want to read Scarlet Witch. It came out in 2016. It's a solo run where Wanda basically goes on this weird eat, pray, love thing because she's like, I don't know who I am. I've only ever been Pietro's sister and the Vision's wife, and I'm going to go off on my own and figure my stuff out, which is like valid, but also like she's just like ditching her family, which doesn't seem canon Wanda to me, but that's okay. I'm not writing her, whatever. The art in this comic though, beautiful, incredible. Her outfit, oh my gosh, like it's so aesthetically pleasing, and it's not like it's a bad read or anything. It's a good comic. It's just I don't agree with that, which is fine, in my prerogative. But she actually learns that her mother was the Scarlet Witch, and this is a very powerful position that's given to her through birthright, and she learns that Magneto's not her father, blah, blah, blah. All that important stuff. So super relevant to the MCU, and I would suggest if you're interested in Wanda Maximoff, you pick it up. You can pick it up at your favorite local comic book shop, I bet. If they don't have it on hand, I'm sure they're happy to order it for you. Comic book shops across the country, like a lot of small businesses, of course, are still suffering. There are so many here in Portland that are great. I go to Floating World Comics, located at 400 Northwest Cooch Street. They're doing limited hours, so you can go there masked up and talk to them, or they're also doing mail order, so you can go through their website and order. But any comic book shop here, I mean, it's great to support local, like please do. And I'm sure wherever you're watching, you have a great comic book shop that's also hard up and would love you to be a patron. Okay. And here's just like some side stuff. If you're interested in Quicksilver, I cannot recommend enough Quicksilver No Surrender. That is a great storyline. You learn so much about Pietro. It's just like, it's top tier Pietro in my opinion. It's so good. It talks a lot about sort of his ethnic background and stuff like that too. And you just get like such a good understanding of the character. So definitely recommend that. It's kind of a standalone situation. You'd be fine if you just picked that up and read it. And then, listen, I haven't read this comic, but I'm going to, okay? Tom King's Vision. Tom King is a great author, in my opinion, a great writer. I've read a lot of his stuff, and I've really, really enjoyed it. I just didn't care about Vision before this. Not even really in the MCU, and sometimes in the old comics, he's like kind of a jerk. So I wasn't like super interested, but now we've learned so much about him, and now I'm very, very endeared to him. Like the rest of you, I'm sure. So I'm gonna pick it up. Just so you know, there's not a ton of Wanda in this. It's just about Vision, like what's going on with Vision. So that's there for you as well. Again, please hit up your local comic book shop if you're interested in this stuff. I beg of you. And that's really it. I hope that this reading list wasn't too arduous for you, because I think it's great to get into comics, and I know it can be super overwhelming. So I hope I made that a little bit easier for you. And if you need any more help, I will do my best. Please find me on social media, on Twitter. Here I am. I'm always happy to help and recommend comics to you. And there are so many people in the comic sphere who are just very, very welcoming and want to help you get into comics. And if you love the MCU stuff, you will love reading comics. I promise. What a ride. That's all I have for you this week. I'm really excited for The Falcon and Winter Soldier to begin. Begins next week, next Friday, March 19th, and I will be doing the same thing that I was doing for WandaVision. But I have a lot less to say about Bucky Barnes and Sam Wilson, not because I don't appreciate them, but because they're not Wanda Maximoff. That's it. It's not their fault. No one can be Wanda Maximoff, just Wanda. But anyway, thank you so much for sticking through this video and this WandaVision adventure with me. I hope that you don't have too much of a void in your life missing our favorite witch. But yeah, and I will see you guys next week, same-ish time, same place. And until then, this has been Nerd News with Destiny.